Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time. We're really excited to present, a COVID-19 response and a hurricane preparedness presentation. And I want to introduce myself. My name is Stephanie Schwartz, and I am one of the regional account managers for Interstate Restoration. And I'm going to pass it along to Leanne Borza.
Hello, everyone. My name is Leanne Borza. I'm from Super Restoration, which now is joined with Interstate. Thank you all for joining us, and I appreciate you coming, and we hope that we will all get through this and learn. Thank you.
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Licata. I'm a national account manager with Interstate Restoration, and I appreciate y'all taking the time out today to hear a little bit about our experiences and what we have learned as a restoration company, as a company that's very involved in this process by doing the proactive, meaning that there's a suspect case that the site might be contaminated with the COVID-19 virus, a proactive disinfection, all the way to reactive disinfections where we come into a site that's actually been confirmed affected by the virus, and we do the cleaning. So what we want to talk a little bit about today is talk about COVID-19. Since the beginning of this pandemic, the information has become and since continue to become very fluid. There's a lot of things that have changed since February, March, when we first started learning about this affecting the U.S. and other parts of the world. A lot of things have changed since then. So we're going to talk a little bit about where is COVID-19 today? What do we know about it today? We're going to also talk about, this is another thing that's been very fluid from the beginning, is what are the proper disinfection protocols? What should people be doing to properly disinfect to get rid of COVID-19 from their area? And then we're all faced now with, I know Palm Beach County has already started this. Broward and Dade are going to be coming very soon. But what's the reopening process? What does that look like? What are some of the things that you need to do to prepare your facility to properly reopen, keeping your residents, your guests, the people that are entering into your facility, as well as your employees safe? And I know you guys don't want to hear this, but I have to tell you, hurricane season is right around the corner. So we're going to talk a little bit about things. I know everybody's really busy and inundated with the COVID-19 reopenings and disinfections and the unknown, but we really need to start talking about, or at least thinking about, hurricane season. So we're going to go through a few tips of what you could be doing now that could prepare yourselves for the upcoming hurricane season. And then we'll talk a little bit about how Interstate could help you with both of those processes. So let's talk about COVID-19. As we know, COVID-19 mainly spreads, it's from person to person, and it's when someone who's infected coughs or sneezes, and then they send droplets throughout the air of their cough or their sneeze, containing the virus through the air, where a healthy person can then either breathe in those droplets, either through your mouth or through your nose. And you could also catch the virus if someone coughs or sneezes and those droplets end up touching a surface, and then you go ahead and touch that surface, and then you touch your nose or your mouth or your eyes, you can then get affected by the COVID-19 virus. And as of right now, this is how we're sure of how this virus has been spreading since this pandemic has started. So we talk about surfaces, and I said that if a person might cough or sneeze on a surface, how long does that virus actually live on that surface before it dies? So basically what we want to look at here is, what's the time frame from when that surface becomes contaminated till when you could touch it and not worry about contracting the virus? So here's some household items, but we could expand on this a little bit. So if you think about copper, the virus will live on copper for up to 4 hours. But think about what's copper, and think about, let's say someone walks into Wawa and they go and they pay for their groceries, their food or whatever, and their bill's $4.02. So they wipe their nose with their hand, they reach into their pocket and they grab out 2 pennies, which are copper. They hand it to the person behind the cash register, and then that person behind the cash register then puts it in the drawer. Right? So you're next in line and you buy your items, and everything comes to $3.96. Well, then that cashier then takes his hand, puts it in the cash register, and hands you 2 pennies that are contaminated with the COVID-19. So there's nothing you could do that's going to prevent that from spreading. But what you can do is ensure that you're practicing safe hygiene practices on your own. So after you go to the store, after you receive change from somewhere, after you touch a box of cereal on a shelf at a store, because the COVID will live on that cardboard for up to 24 hours, don't touch your mouth, don't touch your eyes, don't touch your nose. Make sure you're using hand sanitizers, thoroughly washing your hands often. Anytime you go out and you touch things, immediately after, use a hand sanitizer, wash your hands, don't touch your face and mouth to prevent you from contracting the virus. So some other items, it leaves 72 hours on plastics, 72 hours on stainless steel. Think about elevators. You walk into elevators in your buildings or your facilities, that virus will live on that stainless steel of that elevator for up to 72 hours. So that's something you really need to keep in mind when you're talking about, and we're going to get into this a little bit in a few minutes, is what environment plan are you guys going to implement for the disinfection moving forward? Because just because we're reopening, we can't be confused. This virus didn't go away. It didn't magically disappear and then all of a sudden, okay, we could start reopening and everything goes back to normal. That is absolutely not the case. And it's going to be a long time, if ever, if that becomes the case again. So these are things that we need to really implement and adhere to and really implement into our day-to-day practices, whether it be our hygiene, our employees' hygiene, our processes of cleaning. All that's going to change now. So we're going to go into a few things discussing that, and we're going to talk about the decontamination process. And this is something that has changed from time to time throughout this whole pandemic when it first started to come front and center. So during the decontamination process, one of the things that you need to kind of do is identify the possible contaminated areas. If it's a confirmed case, let's just say that a person that parked in the parking garage of your hotel, they come into the hotel and they check in or what have you. What paths have they traveled? Is there a parking garage? Are there walkways from the parking garage to the hotel area? Did they have to take elevators? Is there stairwells? Identify potential contaminated areas. Identify a team that's properly trained and equipped. There's certain OSHA guidelines that train people that are disinfecting this virus on actually how to put on and take off a mask, how to put on and take off their PPEs. If these protocols aren't followed, that person can run the risk, because they're not taking their mask off properly, they could run the risk of recontaminating a space that they just cleaned. So make sure you dispatch and engage a team that's been OSHA trained and certified on the proper donning and donning off of their PPE gear. Make sure that you're using the right products to clean. Make sure they're biodegradable, non-carcinogen or poisonous residuals. The EPA has a list of approved products that are approved to disinfect the COVID-19 virus. So make sure you're using one of those products. The disinfection process is a two-step process where not only is it hand wiping both horizontally and vertically, high touch point areas, but it also includes fogging of the entire area. Remember what we talked about earlier. Once those droplets are airborne, those droplets we now know, and early on we didn't think that these droplets were airborne for that long, but we now know that they can be airborne for an extended period of time. This fogging process will help kill any of the virus that's in the air. And most importantly, because we really haven't seen yet what liability consequences or what liability outcomes are going to come from this pandemic, are going to come from people that have gotten sick, maybe in your building. But make sure you get proper documentation of the work performed by whoever it is that you engage to do the disinfection and decontamination process. Documentation is going to be crucial in the event some type of litigation or some type of liability comes down the road for your facility. So make sure you get documentation of exactly what that company used as far as the products, what type of certificates they have as far as OSHA, what PPEs they wore. All this will help you guys in the event that you guys do get sued. It'll help you with your case to, win the lawsuit. So some trends we've been seeing, from the beginning, unfortunately, there's some companies that are seeing this as an opportunity to increase their business. There are companies that really don't do bio disinfections that are jumping into the game and claiming that they could do it. There are certain companies like restoration companies like Interstate that we do bio disinfections and bio cleanups every day. Whether it be from the unfortunate situation where we're dealing with bloodborne pathogens from a suicide or a murder scene, or if someone has MRSA and they go and use the gym in your facility, we are certified and we've done cleanings in the past because of that. We've done cleanings for HIV. We've done cleanings and disinfections, in hospitals. And you can imagine the amount of detail and training that a company has to go through to be allowed to even walk into a hospital to attempt to do some type of disinfection. So make sure that you're engaging a company that has the credentials, the qualifications, and the training to properly disinfect a virus. What we're seeing is, some companies, janitorial companies, I literally just got a flyer in the mail 2 days ago from my pest control company saying that they're doing COVID cleanings. It's a totally different game we're talking about here from what these companies do day in and day out. So, some of the things that some of these companies that they're running out of the PPE, the proper N95 masks. I mean, I'm sure you guys have encountered that trying to get these masks for your staff. These masks aren't readily available. These masks are what OSHA is saying that you need to be wearing in order to disinfect and clean this virus. They're not set up to scale for the amount of business that they might getting in. They're having a huge struggle maintaining their staff for two reasons. A, not a whole lot of staff members want to walk into a potentially harmful situation like this COVID-19, and the employers, if they're any type of good employer that's reputable, isn't going to make somebody and possibly terminate their job if they decide not to do this and put themselves at risk. A lot of the staffing companies are running short on people to provide to companies because people just don't want to do it. Janitorial companies don't have in-house safety experts, and they're not always following the EPA and CDC approved guidelines when it comes to products or proper donning and donning off of PPEs. So you want to make sure that this is something that's not going to go away, and this is something where you might need to have cleanings done on a little bit of a regular basis. So make sure you team up with a company that has all these things in place, that has a safety division, that's constantly monitoring the CDC, EPA, and local health agency guidelines as to how to properly disinfect that. Because these things are changing, especially when it comes to the reopening process that we're going to talk about in a second. So how do you attack it with the right process? How do you do this right? So first of all, what you want to do is you want to make sure that the team you're engaging is asking you the right questions. What path did this person probably take? What risks do they have? Do you have any immune compromised people that might be on your staff or in your facility? What strategies are you currently implementing to help slow down this virus? So after all these questions are asked, and after a discussion is had, we're going to create a detailed scope of work in order to properly decontaminate and disinfect your process. Make sure that safety is always front and center, making sure that all of the team members are wearing the proper protective gear that not only is going to protect them, but it's also going to help protect from cross-contamination by the improper use of PPEs, which we have seen happen. Project management and documentation. As I've said, we still haven't seen the potential liability risks that are connected to the COVID-19. So make sure that you're one step ahead of the game and you have your documentation in place in the event that you do get served or sued from someone that might have been infected from this loss. Excuse me, I had to take a sip of water there. So make sure that the company you're engaging has completed projects, has been, has experience in decontamination, and not just with COVID. Like I said earlier, make sure that the company that you're going to engage with has experience with biocleanings. And that's a great question that you really should ask. What experience prior to COVID-19 has your company had in biocleanups and disinfections? So choosing the right companies is crucial in securing and ensuring that you're protecting yourself from a liability standpoint, as well as properly disinfecting your facility, keeping your employees and your guests, residents, tenants out of harm's way. So let's talk about the reopening process. And this, if you turn on the news, this is all we're hearing about is the reopening. And what do we do? We're not getting a whole lot of direction, except for, make sure you're engaging in proper CDC protocols, make sure you have, 6 foot distance, make sure you're wearing masks, but what does all that mean? So the first thing you want to do is you really want to do your due diligence to mitigate the risk and reduce your liabilities. And what does that mean? Each municipality, each county has different rules. So make sure you have a very good understanding of, federal, state, OSHA, and CDC guidelines, because they're mentioning the CDC on every different newscast. Make sure you're adhering to CDC guidelines. Well, if you go on the CDC website, you could then educate yourself on what those guidelines actually are. Make sure you're working with your local health agency, because there's some local guidelines that differ from municipality to municipality to county. There's certain things you can do in Palm Beach County that you can't do in Miami and Dade right now. So make sure you're up on all of those liabilities. Develop a safe work environmental plan. You want to make sure, especially if your building's closed, there's other risk factors that may be underlying besides from potential COVID contamination. If your building's closed, you want to do a thorough inspection. You might have had a leak in a pipe somewhere that's gone unnoticed, and now you have microbial growth. So now that's a whole other issue that you're going to have to deal with on top of the COVID cleanings to make sure that you're creating a safe environment for your employees and guests and tenants to come in and work in. Commit to following the local health agencies, their health guidelines, because they're going to be very fluid. They're going to be changing. Encourage frequent hand sanitizing, set up hand sanitizing stations, make sure you implement and maintain safe social distancing. I'm sure everybody that's been into a Publix or a Wawa or a store, there's actual squares on the floor which say what direction to walk into, how to, what exactly is 6 feet away. If your facility, if you're a hotel and someone is coming up to the check-in area, the guest registration, that might be something that you'd want to implement. What boxes do people need to stand in that keep them in a safe social distancing area so that they can adhere to that. Develop a daily disinfection program. Your daily cleaning routines need to change, and they need to be more thorough, and they need to be more frequent. Remind the employees, we all have, some type of social responsibility to help slow down, prevent a second or third wave. We all have a social responsibility to do our part. So what does that mean? It means if you're sick, stay at home. Encourage your people to stay at home if they're sick. Don't penalize them. There shouldn't be any repercussions for them doing that. Encourage your people to wear masks. Encourage your people to wash their hands regularly. Make sure that they're aware of all these situations. And that comes into communicating your plan. If you're just going to have, you're going to have a reopening on Friday, and on Thursday you decide, hey, I'm going to have a meeting with my staff. We're going to go through our whole plan. Don't assume that after that meeting, everybody's going to remember everything that you say. If you have to, make posters of what the plan is, have regular shift meetings. And part of those regular shift meetings is a reminder of what the steps are of your plan. Constant communication with your employees, because trust me, the plan you have tomorrow might change next week. So making sure by you staying on top of it, you need to communicate those changes with your employees. So regular meetings will form a habit, and then that habit will help reduce the risk of your buildings being contaminated. Inspect and disinfect right away. Before they return to work, have a return to work plan where you're doing an inspection and you're doing a preventative, not a preventive, but more of a proactive treatment. Do a proactive disinfection just in case. At least that shows, your employees, your guests, your residents, your tenants, that you're serious about this and you're taking the necessary steps to protect everybody. So that might be a good idea to engage in a proactive treatment before you reopen your areas. Inspect for hazards. Like I said, there's certain things that might have happened while you had that was closing. So do a thorough inspection. Mold growth is going to be a big one. There could be leaks or maybe a possible small flood that could have happened somewhere in an area that no one saw, that you have mold issues. So these are some of the things that you really need to think about and start implementing for your reopening process. And we'd be more than happy to help you, sit down with you, come up with a plan with you, share what we've learned. So, reach out to Stephanie or Leanne if you have any more questions regarding the opening process and what you should be doing during it. So I know everybody really doesn't want to be thinking about it right now, but guess what? Hurricane season is knocking on our door. So every year, this time of the year, we have the predictions, how's the Atlantic hurricane season? What's the expectations? This year, it's expected to be above average. They're calling for 16 named storms during the upcoming season. 8 of them are forecasted to become hurricanes. 4 could strengthen into major hurricanes. And, being in Florida, before Irma hit, we had a long stretch where we really weren't hit or affected by any big hurricanes. And unfortunately, for some people, the complacency really affected them and they sustained more damage than they should have because they didn't have a plan and they were very complacent. Excuse me. So let's talk about that 2017 hurricane season, just as a reminder. I'm not trying to use any scare tactics, but this is what they talked about during 2017. And what they said about the 2017 hurricane season, that it was going to be just an average season, nothing very exciting. But then, boom, what happens? We had Hurricane Harvey, blast Texas. It's a Cat 4 hurricane. It's devastation in Houston, all the flooding, all the restoration companies, all the large companies that could handle these types of events all converge on Houston for Harvey. All the generators throughout the U.S. are getting rented by these huge oil manufacturers because they needed to make sure that the oil facilities and the oil fields are still up with power. So there was a huge shortage of generators and equipment was becoming very sparse with Harvey in Houston. And then a couple weeks later, and those of us in Florida know, we get crushed with Hurricane Irma, right? Cat 5, devastation in South Florida, Tampa, throughout Florida. Hurricane Irma hits and 185-mile-an-hour winds. So a lot of companies were tied up and they were still in Houston, didn't have the resources to break off of the Harvey hurricane to come and help Irma. But Interstate did. We broke off our resources. We mobilized resources from Michigan, from all over the country, and we were combating Harvey. So we're in the thick of things. We're fighting, 2 major fronts here. And then a couple weeks later, boom, Irma hits, or Maria hits. So Maria hits the islands. We have customers in the islands. So we're scrambling and we're figuring out ways, how do we handle all of these different fronts and make sure all of our customers are taken care of? It was the resources available. So making sure that you're teaming up with a company with vast resources. We're going to talk about this in a minute, because right now we're getting forecasted for an above average season. So 2017 was an average season, and look at the devastation that hit. Now, like we always say, the best job in the world is to be a weatherman, because you could be wrong, the majority of the time and still keep your job. But there is that percentage of the time where they're right. And that's where we really need to start being prepared for. So what are some of the things that you could do now to start preparing for hurricane season? And I know that we're swamped and no one wants to really hear about this. No one has time for this. But here's some simple things that you could carve off 45 minutes, an hour a day, and start going through each of these check boxes, a day. Who are your current vendor relationships? Make sure you have their up-to-date contact information. Elevator companies, sprinkler companies, security companies, landscape companies, tree trimming companies. Believe it or not, make sure that you have your paving company on standby, because no one is resealing parking lots, right after a hurricane. So these guys aren't working. But guess what? These guys have all the equipment and all the manpower to do site clearings. So utilize that relationship. Have that conversation with your paving company to get them lined up to help you with site clearing in the event you need that. Who are your on-site contacts? Who are the people that all of your vendors are going to need to communicate with on a per property basis? List all the properties by square footage, age of the building, condition of the building, any special needs of the building. Who's your insurance broker, your insurance company? Who's your broker? Do you have an adjuster or a consultant that are assigned for you? If you don't know that, ask your insurance broker who that is, because that information is going to be important to help expedite your loss and get you back up to speed and back in business as quickly as possible. Make sure your certificates of insurance for each building are up to date. Know what your deductible is. Make sure you see what your flood insurance deductible is. Make sure you have flood insurance in place. See what your hurricane insurance deductible is, because as you guys all know, your liability insurance doesn't cover hurricanes. You have to have a separate policy for both flood and for hurricanes in the event of a named storm, such as Irma when that hit. Set up a company in your purchasing system. I know it says Interstate there, but whoever you decide to partner up with, to call at 3 a.m. When you get damage, or if you get any damage from a storm, make sure you have that person all set up so you're not dealing with red tape, which is preventing that company from responding and getting you guys up to speed as quick as possible. Make sure you have disaster letters in place. This is what our company is going to need to show the authorities, local law enforcement, that shows that we have access to that site. Sometimes the local law enforcement agencies won't let us on that site to begin our mitigation process without an access letter. Determine company special needs. Do you guys need generators? Special needs for staff, special needs for guests. What's your evacuation plans? So all these things you could be starting to do right now that if you look at them, they really aren't going to take up a whole lot of time, but at least you could start checking off the boxes and start creating a file for your 2020 hurricane preparedness. So talking about a partner, talking about this, say the size of your building, large hotels, you want to establish your partnerships well in advance. One of the questions that you want to ask your partner who's going to come in and respond in the event that you suffer from damage from a major storm, you want to confirm what are your available local resources, resources that you could get here in 2 hours. What does that look like for your company? What are your available resources from outside of Florida, from outside of the local area? Do you have offices or resources in Michigan? Do you have resources in Texas? Do you have resources in North Carolina or California or Colorado that you're going to be converging into Florida or wherever that storm touches ground? Do you have a mobilization plan in place for you to make sure that you have enough equipment to cover all of your buildings that you have in the path of the storm? What does that look like? So those are the questions that you want to be asking your partner. Involve the key stakeholders to minimize loss and reduce the overall costs. A smart thing that some of our clients do is they have a meeting pre-hurricane season, like right about now, with us, their adjuster, their consultant, and their risk manager. So everybody's on the same page. So we know that once that loss hits, we get to work and there's no one waiting for an adjuster to show up. That we're not waiting for approval to cut drywall or to not cut drywall. So having all these meetings up front will help get on your feet, minimize your lost time and your building interruption time and the inconvenience that a major storm could put on your business. So make sure you understand who your partner is. And I strongly suggest, getting a partner now, because that becomes important on who gets priority service. Companies like Interstate, we don't just, we're just not that large loss hurricane company. We do work, we do $5,000 jobs every day here in South Florida. We have probably 60 employees, full-time, 100 trucks, thousands of pieces of equipment. We're doing work every day in South Florida. So we're not just that large loss company. So if one of our customers, commits to us during the storm, say, Paul, we're your partner, we have damage, boom, as soon as they commit to us, we're going to roll out. National accounts, they're going to get priority over non-national accounts. So we have a national partner agreement or regional partner agreement with our clients. And those are the people that when we do our due diligence and we plot out all of the buildings that we have a risk of having to help and supply equipment to in the storm's path, people that have the national or regional accounts, their buildings are going to get accounted for, because if you don't have that, we don't have your building list, your site list in our system. So it's important to have, some type of partnership agreement with your company that you're going to. Now, I'm not saying that if you don't have a national account or you never given us work before, that we're not going to come. We will come, because our commitment is we won't let you down. It's just that we might not be able to get to you the next day or that day. It might be a day or two or three before we could free up resources to come and respond to your loss. So make sure you identify your partner. So how the partnerships, and when you have a partnership, established, there has to be some pre-planning with your partner. So we're going to establish the plan with you. We're going to develop contingency plans. We're going to help educate and prepare your employees. We're going to design solutions around the uniqueness and your business, because there could be, small losses that, like I said, we will definitely, love to respond to, as well as the large and complex losses. So you're dealing with one company that you're comfortable with, and I think that's the most important thing for you and for your business, is being comfortable with your partner and making sure that you have that comfort level that when you suffer large loss, or you call it 2 a.m, that the company that shows up, exactly what they're going to do. They know exactly what to do during that loss, and it'll help rapidly get you back up to speed. Make sure that there's a safety program in place. By doing all of this and by establishing your partnership and by establishing a relationship, what we call the circle of trust, with your broker, with your adjuster, with your consultant, and with your restoration company, with all of us sitting down together, being on the same page, we've seen in our 20 plus years experience, and it's not because we're really smart guys or, we've identified this, new thing, but it just made sense that the relationship with all of these parties up front helps minimize the overall time of the loss, shortens the time to mitigate. We roll right into the reconstruction, which will get your building back up to speed quicker than if you didn't do this. And that is a fact that we've proven, and we've saved, if you look at a overall loss of a cost of a job, not just the invoice that you're going to get from Interstate Restoration, but talk about, business interruption, talk about, employees being out of work, talk about maybe losing employees because they're out of work for so long and they go to work for someone else. Talk about losing residents, talk about losing business. All these things add up in what the actual cost of a loss is. What we've proven is by shortening the time from the day we show up to start water extraction and setting equipment to the day we finish reconstruction, we've shortened that time, which will obviously lower the overall cost of that loss. So if you have any more questions about that, please reach out to Stephanie or Leanne, and they could tell you more about our partnership. And, a little bit about Interstate. What do? We work for, like I said, we do large losses, we do small losses. We are the second largest restoration company, commercial restoration company in North America. We respond to emergency response, mitigation, water damage, dry and dehumidification. Like I said, which is important, is we have a lot of experience in hazardous and biomaterial cleanup, contamination, and disinfection. We didn't just start doing this when this whole COVID-19 pandemic broke. We can provide temporary power, HVAC services, and we are experts in large and complex property recovery. So once again, I appreciate you guys sitting with us. I hope this presentation, you found some value to it, and hopefully you learned a couple things during the process. If you have any questions, there's Leanne and Stephanie's contact information with their email addresses and their cell phone numbers. So I appreciate your time, and please, everybody, if you have any questions about anything, please don't hesitate to reach out, and be safe. Take care.